Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours, the question where you, you can tell I don't rehearse these things very often. The show where you post your questions about SQL Server, Azure SQL, Microsoft Data Platform, post those in the link down below, and then I go through the highest upvoted ones and answer those live. Good morning, Andy Leonard is in here. Default Blame Acceptor is in here. I got some of the regular crowd in here. I stream usually Wednesday and Thursday mornings on Twitch, just doing it during the summer. I kind of think of it as like a summer school kind of thing. I'll be in here next week as well. After that, I take 1 week off because I have to go to Ohio. Going to Ohio for a client for a week, and then I'll be back on for most of the rest of the summer. Um, Amir says, do I play today? No, I'm not going to do Dead by Daylight today. I couldn't get my streaming set up for Dead by Daylight in time. So today's going to be boring old technical questions and answers. Can you believe it? You're actually going to have to learn something. But I think I will have the streaming set up ready to go for next week so that hopefully one of the days next week I'll spend the time playing Dead by Daylight. It's the first time that I've ever tried streaming Dead by Daylight from my home theater, and it's pitch black. It's like completely black. Black curtains, all those things. Hi, TomInYorks. The black curtains, blackout, no lights in there whatsoever. So I realized that I have to put some lighting in because I have really good camera gear, but it still just only picks up like a shadow of me. So I have to figure out how I'm going to light it in a way that still makes sense for me to play because I play up on a big home theater screen. So that'll be interesting to see. Tom says he was on holiday and vacation in Vegas this time last month. What an amazing city it is. It is absolutely spectacular. If you're bored in Vegas, it's your own fault. There are so many incredible things to do all the time that are basically paid for by all the tourists. So every band you've ever wanted to see, every magician, comedian, Cirque du Soleil shows, incredible restaurants. It's just an amazing place to be. G Surgeon, good morning to the Netherlands, or good afternoon, I suppose it would be. So the highest voted question we have in here is from Nortzi. Nortzi asks, "Hi Brent, is there a way to optimize sorting result using a column from a different table?" And this is a really fun question because so you have two tables, let's say, and you want to sort one table by something that's in another table. Well, the data in this other table could change at any time. Stuff could be inserted, updated, or deleted in it at all times. So there's not really a way for SQL Server to optimize this data for something that it doesn't know until after the data's been joined together. Or is there? What if we join that data together ahead of time? And the tool that lets you do that is an indexed view. SQL Server in an indexed view, and this has been supported since SQL Server 2000, will let you join two tables together, or more tables if you like, and then sort the end result. And it's kept up to date automatically with inserts, updates, and deletes. Now, there are tons of drawbacks with them, just like there are with any index. The more inserts, updates, and deletes that you do, the slower that maintenance will become, keeping that view up to date. You can learn more about it in the indexed view module of my Mastering Index Tuning class. CTI Geek says, I keep telling my family that Vegas would be fun, even though we don't drink and gamble much. I don't gamble at all. I do drink a lot. I don't gamble at all, but it's still, Vegas is a ton of fun. I don't drink that often out in... That's not true. I drink often out in restaurants. Tom says, highly recommend Mad Apple by Cirque du Soleil. Really, anything by Cirque du Soleil is a pretty good shop. Gustav asks, who's winning the serverless cloud race? Well, I don't think it's really important to win the serverless crowd race just yet. I think it's so early in that industry, and it's relatively easy to apply serverless technology to new databases. It's really hard to do it to existing databases, stuff like SQL Server, Oracle, and so forth. So the ones that were brand new had a temporary edge, like Aurora pulled off amazing improvements. Amazon Aurora pulled off amazing improvements with serverless that Microsoft SQL Server and Azure SQL DB have a long way to go before they can catch up. But I don't think that's really important because, of course, Aurora is just such an upstart compared to Microsoft SQL Server and, say, Oracle, that as long as those bigger companies, I say bigger, the database portions of those companies, as long as they continue to invest, I think they should be able to catch up at some point. But right now, it's just far and away Amazon Aurora. It's not even close. Next up, Pool Party asks, you wrote on your database that SHRINKDATABASE isn't good because it creates fragmentation and therefore the problem isn't solved. You're summing that up a lot, but I kind of get where you're going. He says, but I'm in an Azure SQL Elastic Pool scenario and I need to reclaim more space, otherwise my databases won't fit. What should I do? Well, the first question I'd ask is, do you expect your databases to grow? Do you expect the data in them to grow? Most people do. Data tends to get larger. I'll tell you a dirty secret. Everybody who tells you that they purge out data and archive data, they are lying to you. They do not. They say, oh, we have a retention policy and we're only supposed to keep 3 years worth of data. How much is in there right now? 142 years. Go in and look at the data and you'll see that in most cases, people just never end up deleting the data. Because of that, when you shrink that data, how much are you really going to reclaim? Or is it just going to continue to grow for each user database? Put some real thought into that before you do the shrinking, because what I bet you'll find is that you're not going to have that much space a year left over from now, and your shrinking would have been in vain. You probably want multiple elastic pools. But if you had some kind of controversy or some catastrophic thing where you deleted 90% of the data and you swear to God it'll never come back, then by all means shrink it. That accomplishes the goal that you're looking for. It won't be easy. It'll take a long time, especially if you're shrinking 90% of a database. But good luck, bon voyage. You're the one who had the catastrophe. Next up, SD says, I have non-production availability groups that I want to downgrade, or I want to upgrade from SQL Server 2016-17 to SQL Server 2022, and at the same time downgrade the edition. Nope, let me start you right there. Stop you right there. You do not want to do that. Period. End of story. Look, here's the thing. Whoever built that original availability group, and you say they're non-production, whoever built it did not know what they were doing. And that might include you in a past tense. And that's okay. You know better now. You were young and you needed the money at the time. But if you didn't even have the right edition installed, I guarantee you that you have all kinds of other problems inside there. Don't upgrade. Build new SQL Server availability groups on the version that you want and simply restore the databases over onto the new availability group. After all, we know that you can take an outage because you said that these are non-production. So go build the new one the way that it's supposed to be built. Now that you're wise and attractive, do it the right way and just restore the databases onto the new environment. Next up, CTI Geek says, I think we all built availability groups when we were young and foolish. I agree. That was certainly the case for me, and I think that also includes Microsoft when they first shipped the product, because that product sucked when they first brought it out. When you say negative things, it doesn't really hurt as bad if you sing it. You don't do a good job and you're incompetent. Then people are laughing at your singing instead of crying about what you said. I think that's how that works. Deepak asks, do you think generative AI would be a good addition to Redgate SQL Prompt for things like helping you write queries? Well, Microsoft is already ahead of the game there. They've already put it into Azure Data Studio. There's a ChatGPT, well, it's called GitHub Copilot extension for Azure Data Studio that purportedly helps to do that exact thing. If you go into my, the moderator held a message about being a dunce. I approved that. Microsoft already added this to GitHub Copilot to Azure Data Studio. If you go through my recent YouTube videos, I spent about 45 minutes on GitHub showing you GitHub Copilot for Azure Data Studio's junk. I am connected to SQL Server, and it's writing queries in Postgres, like PG SQL. It's not even, doesn't even compile on Microsoft SQL Server. So do I think generative AI would make a good addition? Yes, but I tell you what, you sure better not code it using generative ATI, because I'm artificial intelligence, because I almost guarantee you that's what they did. It's like it was a minimum viable product, shipped it. We have artificial intelligence. No, you have artificial stupidity. If you're coding the wrong language for the database that you're connected to, that stuff is a hot mess. Now, I'm not saying it's always going to be bad. You know, of course, the thing with AI is that it catches up. You know, the technology is catching up so fast. Some parts of it are so good so quickly. So I hope that at some point it'll be better. But in the state of mid-2023, it's genuine stupidity. Next up, let's see. Jahid asks, "Hi, Brent. I am DBA." You're the DBA. Oh, okay. "I want to use transactional replication with updatable subscriptions. Why? Why do you want it? You don't want it. Well, let me rephrase that. You do want to do it. It's just the technology's really bad. I'm actually with you there. I guess I would like to do that too, but the technology's terrible." He says, "There are multiple services that are inserting and updating, deleting every 5 seconds. I want to make this on both pub and sub databases without conflicts. What do you suggest?" Well, it's a lot like the Middle East. We would like the Middle East to be without conflicts. We've been struggling with that for a really long time. Transactional replication is a lot like the Middle East. As long as we've had it, there have been conflicts the whole time. And while you and I would love for there to be peace, we will always have conflicts in replication, and we will always have conflicts in the Middle East. The SQL Server 2022 brought out a feature that the last writer wins. This way, with bidirectional transactional replication, whoever writes it last automatically wins over everybody else. This isn't the default. This is something that you have to configure. It's kind of like if we said over in the Middle East, okay, whoever's standing on this land right now owns it. Do you think that would stop the conflicts? Nah, there'd be a whole bunch of people just elbowing each other out of the way. Get out of the way! I stand here now! That's exactly what we've introduced with SQL Server 2022's transactional replication. Last writer always wins. Doesn't solve anything, and if anything, it promotes real conflict, and you don't really know what the history of that land or that record was. So what I would suggest to you is that if you can, you don't try to get involved in the Middle East, and also you try not to get involved in bidirectional replication. When I deal with bidirectional replication, I ask customers, why do you really want this? And they often say, well, I want to save money on licensing by using both of the servers. No, you don't, because then you pay for both of those servers since you're querying them both. Use them in an active, passive type technology so that you're writing only to one of them, and you just cut your licensing costs in half. That's the smart way to do it. Didn't think I'd be able to work the Middle East into there, did you? That's pretty impressive. Adam asks, "Hi, Brent. I'm finding out on occasional that my msdb is going into suspect mode around the same time in the evening." Oh, my God. I've run CheckDB and VM disks and nothing has been found. Have you ever come across this before? Yes. Okay, not for MSDB, but just for databases in general. One thing is that your I/O may be temporarily disrupted around the same time every day. Maybe something's doing like a storage snapshot, or the storage is disappearing out from under you. I had one case where a SAN administrator was doing reboots of the controller at a specific time every day and wasn't telling anyone else, and all the storage would disappear. Now, the place that I would start is make sure that you actually actually have connection to the storage the whole entire time. This is really easy since you say it's happening at the same time every evening. Go into Windows Explorer and see if the storage disappears. Go into SQL Server and run selects in a loop against a table, not just MSDB, but any database. And you may find that all of the databases are disappearing around the same time, and that the only reason you caught it on MSDB was because SQL Server was trying to write to MSDB for something like a backup history. So you probably have bigger storage level issues to address. Dwayne asks, which games do you enjoy on the PC? I don't play PC games. The only reason I have a Windows desktop in the house is it's left over. I have a leftover Windows machine in the house, but everything else here is Apple, and Apple's not really so great on gaming. I don't use this for, like my desktop setup for gaming. I don't use it at all. When I'm done for the day, I walk out of this office. I don't come back in here. I don't like to do fun stuff inside here. I go out and I'll use the PlayStation or use my iPad, but I refuse to use the desktop computer after hours, just because I think it forces you to work too long. You end up blurring lines between work and home. For PlayStation 5, this is such an embarrassing thing to say out loud. I have one game on there, Dead by Daylight. That is the only game that I have on there. It's the only game that I play. I do have Don't Starve Together. I was playing that with Eve for a while because Eve really likes Don't Starve Together. I just can't get into it. It feels like a farming simulator to me. It's like real world chores. I got enough real world chores. Dead by Daylight feels like true escapism to me. Every game finishes in like 20 minutes. You either live or die and you're out of there. I just absolutely adore that. Next up, let's see here. TomInYorks asks, I'll grab a couple of live ones that have come in from currently watching viewers. TomInYorks asks, I'm exploring solutions to locking blocking. I was looking at RCSI or Snapshot Isolation. Can you recommend a good place to start when analyzing the suitability of either of those? Why, yes, Tom, I can. It just so happens that I know someone who teaches training classes on SQL Server. I know someone who offers courses on how to improve your indexes, queries, and SQL Server setups in order to avoid locking and blocking. And Tom, would you believe that that person is highly credible and sometimes sober? You can learn more about that by going over to brentozar.com and click Training up at the top of the screen. In there, you can visit my mastering classes where I explore isolation levels in the mastering server tuning class. DK Kimbo says, is that person Eric Darling? Eric's good also, and I bet he has a class on isolation levels. I don't know his class, like chapter of contents offhand, but he's a smart person as well. So yeah, in there I cover that in the mastering server tuning class. The reason I cover it mastering server tuning is that it affects TempDB, which is something that you usually have to plan for and think about at the server level. So if you want to go check out in the mastering server tuning class the isolation levels module. All right, next up, let's see here. Vishnu asks, which conference is more influential, the Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, or he says Microsoft Bing, but I think he meant Microsoft Build. I think that Apple is more influential for consumer tech. Microsoft Build is more influential for enterprise tech, for things like small business and large business developers. Next up, Vineeth asks, what is your opinion of the new JSON native data type in Azure SQL DB? I am not a fan of storing JSON, whatever you want to call it, in a relational database, because eventually when people do that, they want to query it, and they want to have SQL Server or Azure SQL DB slice and dice in and parse that JSON and find specific values. That's where it gets really CPU intensive and slow. As long as you're only storing it in Azure SQL DB and you're not analyzing it in T-SQL, I'm fine with it. But the instant you find yourself analyzing that JSON data using T-SQL, That's where your heartaches begin. I would rather have people do that analysis over on the client side. If you find yourself having to parse large amounts of JSON data, you're better off just leaving that on a file server and doing that analysis in the app like C#, Python, whatever language you choose to use. Deepak asks, we've got automated weekly Qualys cyber scans attempting to penetrate the SQL server and then reporting findings back to corporate. One of the test threads attempts to connect to the DAC. Do you see any risks in this? Something's trying to hack your SQL server, and you're asking if there are any risks. Let me think about that for a second. Is there any risk in something trying to hack the most important resource that your company has? No, that seems safe. I bet it's totally okay, Deepak. Next up, Eduardo asks, is there such a thing as a memory deadlock? I recently observed multiple parent queries, each snagging 25% of my memory and then calling a linked server loopback connection. What? Why? What? Whose idea was that? No. The memory deadlock is the least of your problems. Linked server loopback queries are the idea from hell. That's terrible because the query's going to need memory. The query's going to need memory to sort and join the data, whatever it is that you're trying to do with the data, and the result sets. And when you call the server itself, it needs that all the memory in order to cache the data too as well, and perhaps any order by stuff that you might have pushed down onto the local server. I can easily imagine scenarios where the query would need twice as much RAM. In addition, linked server loopback queries don't do any data caching, so they'll keep reinventing the wheel even though the data's already cached right there on the server. So no, idea from hell. The resource semaphore weights are the least of your problems. Go fix the linked server loopback query. Next up, let's see here. Dom asks, hi Brent, you mentioned a couple of times about SAN backups for SQL large databases. I Googled it and I didn't find much information about how it works. I'm guessing it's backing up the MDF and LDF and it can't take log backups. You're on an interesting track. What you want to do is go to YouTube and search for Brent Ozar Senior DBA class. Brent Ozar Senior DBA class. It's totally free. I put it out on YouTube. So I stopped updating it like about 10 years ago or something. And so probably 5 years ago. Brent Ozar Senior DBA class, and there's a module in there on SAN snapshot backups. It's like a 30, 45 minute class, and I explain how they work, and I use diagrams. I show you how all that works. Haldora says, for SP Blitz Cache's minutes back argument, is there a good way to tell how many minutes back we can go before data is no longer present? Yeah, don't use the parameter. Don't use the parameter, and you get all the data that SQL Server has. What's the problem you're trying to solve? It sounds like you might think that minutes back means go back that far and look at everything previous, and that's not what it does. It says, show me data for up to this many minutes back, like show me queries that ran in the last 30 minutes. But you wouldn't want to use it to find queries that ran several hours ago and say, only show me those. That's not really what it's for. Next up, Yitzhar asks, do you have any good use cases for the SSMS option, discard results after execution? Yes. If you're trying to load test the SQL Server and you don't want to waste time with SSMS rendering the query results, then that way, especially if it's a large, complicated result set, SQL Server Management Studio just won't render those result sets. I've seen cases where people wanted to bring back, say, 10,000 rows that included all kinds of XML data, and the amount of RAM it takes to render that whole SSMS results grid is terrible, so you get faster response time just throwing the data away. I don't do it often, but there you go. There's your answer. Topoke says, I use lookup columns with my, what? I use lookup tables in my DB, typically with ID and code. Okay, look, Topoke, I'm looking at this whole thing and it's a wall of text. I appreciate that it fit inside there, but this is not something that I'm going to be able to tackle quickly on office hours. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to do, just glancing at it. What's the problem you're trying to solve? If you've got something that's working for you, leave it. Just use it the way it is. This sounds like no one's complaining about performance and you're just trying to wring the last bit of mental performance out of something. Build it easy and roll with it until users complain about performance. But I think you're overthinking it there. And then the last question comes from Dwayne. What Excel skills, if any, do you recommend having for the SQL DBA? I think for me, it's about how do you convey the point that you need to convey. Like, does a user ever ask you for something and you need to convey that data to them in a way that they can easily understand? Classic example for production DBAs is a manager will say, how many SQL servers do we have and what's the total licensing exposure? So then it's going to be up to you to build a little inventory of here are all our production servers, here's how many CPU cores each that they have, here's how many are standard edition, here's how many are enterprise edition, here's how many are co-residing on the same VM host, so here's how we group licensing together and so forth. So it's how you go about conveying that information. If you get into making the results pretty, it becomes more of a report writer kind of thing. So your company probably has report authors like Power BI people that you can go talk to. If you need help visualizing the information, go talk to them. But otherwise, for me, it's just like, how can I communicate that data quickly? And you can kind of tell because anytime that I do anything numeric on my blog, so like I have poll results coming for a Monday blog post, my colors are terrible, my visualizations are terrible, all of that. So, all right, there are all the questions that are over on PollGab. Perfect timing. We're right at the top of the time. Oh, somebody asked one more. We'll take one more, and then this will be the end of it. Dave says, some developers say that DBA stands for don't be asking. Other examples are don't bother asking, doesn't believe anyone, default blame acceptor, does about anything. There are all kinds of examples for that. How do I feel between developer and DBA relationships? In a lot of companies, DBAs are responsible for telling people no. Like they have to say, no, you can't deploy this to production. No, you're not allowed to have that index there. No, you can't store this inside the database. Because of that, there's often a lot of adversarial relationships. I learned kind of early on in my career that my job is to make the developers look good. My job is not to make the developers look bad, and it doesn't matter how incompetent they are. My job is to make the developers look good. My job is to help them, make sure that their database server is reliable and fast for them. So when you take that kind of mentality that developers are my customers, I want to make sure that they're happy, that our company is happy with our developers. I want my company to go, oh my God, my developers are amazing. They do all these, build all this value for us. The more better I can make my developers look, then the more they like me and the more the company likes me. If you get into an adversarial relationship where you say, the developers suck, remember that the company likes the developers. The company is excited about the results that the developers produce. The company loves using their application. You ain't building jack. The company never sits down at a computer and goes, wow, this thing the database administrator built is amazing. No, they think that you're kind of like a waste of money and time. So make those developers look good. Michael J. Schwartz says, if somehow leaders can foster between devs and DBAs, making them allies, it's a superpower for the organization. I agree. I think the more that you can build consensus and get people on the same page and marching together towards the same objective, the better off you become. I'm the same way as a consultant, I usually walk in and there are guns pointed at each other. The sysadmins hate the DBAs, hate the users, hate the developers. And it helps me to get everybody on the same page by saying, all of you have guns pointed at each other. Here's the thing. The enemy isn't each other. The enemy is the SQL Server. SQL Server is the thing that sucks, that we're all trying to fight, and we're trying to get the right results out of it. We're trying to make those results become fast. We're going to team up, and I'm going to show you how to conquer that SQL Server and make it less of a problem. Here's what the developers can do to battle SQL Server. Here's what the DBAs can do to battle SQL Server. Here's what the sysadmins can do to battle SQL Server. And that helps the DBAs understand that they're not battling the developer's code. The sysadmins aren't battling the terrible things that the DBAs do. Now, that approach doesn't always work. I mean, there are some shops where that works. There are other shops where I have to say, okay, look, the thing that you're doing to the SQL Server is not appropriate, and we're going to have to stop. But otherwise, it really helps to unite people against the SQL Server. All right, so there we go. There's the end of the broadcast. Somebody up there said, let me see who that was. CTI Geek said, raid C# Fritz. Now, this is going to be one of those things where, because I don't do it too often, I'm going to have to go figure out. First is C# Twits. Oh, Fritz, he is streaming now. Okay, perfect. Now, I got to figure out how to raid him, because this is a little bit tricky. I never see this exactly the way I want it. Show it in actual size. Nope, come back here. View actual size. Is it /raid? C#, whoops, C# Fritz. Let's see if that works. The raid has been created. Okay, cool. So what's going to happen is y'all are going to now leave and head over to C# Fritz's channel. Have a great morning, and I will see y'all next week on Office Hours. I don't even remember what it is. Have fun.